Possibly you will have heard of this man. He's a world-renowned psychiatrist and author. Particularly, we have published particularly common, a mystery brought him to Northern Ireland, and he has a long time interest in work, men's work in Northern Ireland, Steve Biddulph. He would love to be here today, but as I say, circumstances don't dictate that, extensive dictate that, but he has recorded a audience for us. Hopefully you will, we have a wee bit of difficulty with sound quality, so hopefully everybody will be here okay when we play it, but he has a great insight to a lot of the things that men and boys face and the challenges that we all really have to be aware of going forward. So, let me see if it was working.
Hello, I'm Steve, and it's brilliant to be talking to you at the start of this conference. It's always kind of odd to introduce myself because my books and talks are so personal in tone that those of you who've already encountered me in those ways are kind of like family. But I stay away as much as I can from social media and other, in fact, any media, if I can help it. And so I might be a complete stranger to others there. And so here goes. I'm talking from my home in Tasmania. I live on the lands of the Litteramirina people. In English, it's called the Tamar Valley. And it's a freezing cold day, but a beautiful sunshine. I was invited to talk to you by Colin Fowler, who is a dear friend who I have huge respect for. And Colin hosted me in Belfast and Northern Ireland many times over the years. One of the things that was so inspiring on those visits is the degree of collaboration with voluntary effort. That great things were happening despite low funding. As you know, men are the key to almost all of our social problems, for women and children too. And so nothing makes a better world than getting male energy activated. The Manifest program that's being launched here today is a great example of that men will participate in programs that are presented in a male-friendly way. And always remember, in men's work, whatever form you are doing it, you can turbocharge your efforts fivefold if you draw on volunteer energies as well, getting the men you are helping to help other men. It's like heroism lies inside every male heart, and volunteerism takes away the victim mentality and gives back self-belief, and that attracts the best in men. I hope that makes sense. So let's begin. 40 years ago, I started, see, I'm very, very ancient and decrepit now, but 40 years ago, I started my working life in a working class mill town called Launceston, in a very innovative clinic that offered family therapy free of charge to families having problems with their kids. So we got to meet for the first time lots and lots of dads. And I was very quickly struck by how much those dads were struggling. All of us as young fathers, we love our children, but if we haven't got the skills or the examples to work from, we can easily lapse into violence or just being emotionally distant or being harsh and cold with our children. And of course, all the sequelae of that, marriages struggling and breaking down, and men disappearing altogether. And so men can be brilliant when they're good and brave and open-hearted and energizing and vital in their kids' and families' lives and in community life. So we had to ask the question, what was going wrong? Why instead do they fill the news headlines and for all the wrong reasons? Where did this come from? The answer to this might shock you. We are learning much, much more now than we knew back then. It begins in babyhood and even in the womb. And there is plenty we can do to fix it, which is the purpose of your being here today. In 2017, one of the world's leading neuroscientists, a man called Alan Shore, spelled with a C, S-C-H-O-R-E, Alan published a review of pretty much everything we know about the development of men and boys from a brain perspective. It confirmed what I'd been writing about in my books, Manhood and Raising Boys, but it went much further, showing that really men were the vulnerable sex from the womb onwards. In particular, our difference was that despite generally being bigger and stronger, our brains were significantly slower to develop, even before birth and right through until our early 20s. And the consequences of this are huge. Let me show you a drawing, which I'm sort of famous for. What are these two strange objects? Let me complete the picture for you. Just hang on a second. Yep, they're two babies lying in a cot, maybe in a hospital or somewhere, and they look exactly the same. But you know what? This baby, the one on the left, has incredibly different life chances. It has 3 times the risk of dying before the age of 24. 3 times the risk of becoming a drug addict. Only about half the chance of going on to post-school education, and an astonishing 19 times higher chance of ending up in prison. In other words, massive differences in life prospects. And you know where we're going with this, don't you? What is the difference with the baby on the left? It's male. So, what's going on here? There are 2 sets of reasons. One is biological and one is social. The biological one is one we're just coming to grips with. And this is what Shaw was writing about. When you have a slower developing brain, it is more vulnerable for a longer period of time. In the first year of life, the year that really matters, is all about growing the prefrontal cortex, this part, the surface of the brain just inside your forehead. This is where we learn to be calm, feel safe, be able to trust, and be able to love. This part of the brain only grows by interaction. If the environmental conditions are lacking, if interaction is lacking, then it can fail to grow. The mother or the father or other caregiver interacts. If they interact in a soothing, engaged, fun and caring way, the brain of the adult stimulates the brain of the baby to its full potential. But if the parent or carer is stressed or in conflict or unsupported or addicted or depressed, then this process fails. And because boys are less developed for their age than girls, they're probably twice as affected. So they may grow into schoolboys and teenagers and then men with trouble in managing anxiety, being socially connected and being loving and relaxed. And of course, in males, anxiety is not implosive in the way that it is in girls. Quite often it's explosive and turns into anger problems and violence problems. Now, we can help with this at any age. And so our work with men involves rebuilding the lost parts, getting engaged, connected, building trust, and based on that trust, gradually helping them to express emotions and move through stress. It's always through a social bond that men help to develop these mental fitness aspects. And these are the things which the Manifest program, as well as many other ways that I know you're all working with men, have their deeper effects. Just pause for breath there for a minute. The second problem, which we have with boys growing into men, can be illustrated with another famous diagram, which I've shown to around 100,000 people over the years. It's called the pyramid and the chimney. If you're a girl growing up anywhere in the world, almost any time in history, you will probably grow up surrounded by capable and emotionally alive women, mums, aunties, mums' friends, school teachers. I know you're probably all over it by now, but we in Australia love the comedy series Derry Girls. So let's take that as an instance. Just think how rich and interesting the female characters are in that series, compared with the rather bitter and narrow world of the men. If you're a boy growing up in the 20th century, everything changed for men in that century. Before industrialization, men were very present and alive in the lives of children. I've worked in hunter-gatherer, lived in a hunter-gatherer society in the Pacific, and the men are loving and tender to the children, and they're engaged with the children all the time. But when we industrialized, we sent men into factories and office buildings. We sent them to many horrific wars, and we left several generations very remote and shut down. So boys growing up in the 20th century hardly saw their dads, and they're often hammered by trauma and often resulting alcoholism. So if we go back to our diagram, a girl throughout history had a whole wide pyramid, thousands of hours and days and years of female example, while boys from the 1800s onwards had just that narrow little chimney of male example. When I first wrote Raising Boys, it was 6 minutes a day on average worldwide. By the time we wrote the new edition 30 years later, that, thanks to people like Colin and everyone around the world working on this, we had trebled that figure. We are now resurrecting fatherhood, and a kind of fatherhood that is kind and safe and funny and energetic. But a generation of men missed out, and those are the ones we're wanting to save today. Now, as we get towards finishing up, Colin and the team asked me to sum up the challenge stages in male development. All human development has kind of gateways that we have to pass through, or steps upwards to a higher level of being. And that's what makes life so brilliant. We always grow, but each stage needs the right support. It's like a baby bird. Those worms have got to arrive in time or we don't make it. Social support has to cluster around humans so they make each new stage a success. If it doesn't, then we get stuck. There are billions of men who fail to grow up past toddlerhood even, and they are a blight on the world that we live in. So here is a good map of the male stages. Let me just read them in case you forgot your glasses. Sit back, breathe easy, and I'll get you there. So, there are 9 of these. The first one we've talked about is babyhood attachment and be able to form a warm, affectionate relationship with a carer. The second is the exploratory, playful, confidently going out into the world of a little child. Third is school, which suddenly requires a lot of people skills and a lot of self-regulation, and we have to do more to transition. And there's a terrific book which is now, I really recommend, which came out just last year, called Of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters and What to Do About It, by Richard Reeves. And Reeves is a researcher at the Brookings Institute in the States, and he very much documents policy changes that are needed. And one of those is that we should not start school with boys as early as we do with girls, that boys should delay school starting by 1 year. Now, I wrote about this in Raising Boys, but he brings it as an overall policy change, which he believes that whole school systems should take on board. The fourth step, adolescent self-discovery, finding out your values and abilities, again, happens best when you're in those kind of youth work settings where adults who are not your parents, uncles, friends, sports coaches, guitar teachers and people are there so that you can move beyond your family's limitations and take in a better kind of idea of how to be a man. Work pathways, partnering. We have a whole incel movement of young men who are failing to find intimacy or make it work. And of course, addiction to computer gaming and living online have hugely impaired boys' social skills, even just the fact that they just don't spend enough time being out with human beings. Fatherhood is an enormous crisis point for all its beauty and the joy of it. It can easily, if you had difficulties in your own babyhood or childhood, it can trigger a lot of anxiety. And there's the stress of being a provider for a family, which today we share with women, but is not still lifted from us as a, can I do this? There are marital growth crises, which every marriage has big transitions as it grows up. We're all babies when we get together with our partners, and you have to be able to not have massive flooding of anxiety, but be able to figure out and communicate, come back through those marriage challenges and not panic. And finally, aging and finding creativity and generativity outside of the workplace capitalist economy, but just as a human being. And so every one of these stages needs inputs and supports from the community around us. It's time to finish. You might have been told that men don't care about their health or their well-being, and worse, that they are selfish and uncaring about others. But in fact, men are desperate for meaning and purpose. And our purpose is clear. My biggest learning was from Richard Rohr, a wonderful thinker in this space, that we are not in this world for ourselves, as a young boy might think. All joy, all fulfillment, all satisfaction comes from being here for each other. If we men are engaged, then we will bring our energies just in the nick of time to a dying world, so we can turn things around and be life givers. That is our deep reason for being alive, and it's revolutionary when enough of us realize it. Have a wonderful conference, and love to everyone there.